Oil and gas needs to understand that this should not be a business as usual case. With the current federal administration, the moment is here, and it's time to take the high road and look past previous conflicts with environmental organizations or other groups and sit down to make incremental progress together.
I'm Carolyn Parrs, communicator, coach, and host of Just Power, a podcast about creating a clean energy future without leaving anyone behind. Join me as we explore the technologies, policies, and human stories that can make clean energy not just sustainable for our planet, but accessible for everyone. Welcome to Just Power. Hi, I'm Carolyn Parrs. Before we begin today's conversation, I just want to acknowledge what's happening right now in Minnesota and across our country. Our hearts and prayers truly go out to all people that are suffering right now in the chaos that's unfolding. Over the weekend, finally 60 Minnesota CEOs broke their silence and they made a statement on the chaos that is happening in their state. And while it was so important for them to do that, they spoke up. What struck many was how little the statement actually said. And I'm noticing this across the country. We're seeing the same. Corporate leaders that struggle to find their voice in moments that test our fundamental values. Silence is a statement, right? And I'm seeing this through the lens of today's conversation about moving from polarization to progress in energy. So we are seeing many are feeling gridlocked and a lot of issues in energy, not because we lack the technology or the solution, but because we can't talk to each other, right? I've spent personally years in New Mexico working as a bridge builder between a utility and environmental groups that just wouldn't sit down together. And meanwhile, families are caught in the middle, right? They're choosing between groceries and heating bills. So today, my guest, I have on Julia DeTar, and she's an analyst at Adamantine Energy. And she believes that polarization is the real crisis, and she's spending her days trying to break through it. Enter the Sensible Energy Platform. It's a framework designed to get people who usually talk past each other to actually listen to each other and talk about the same questions, especially how do we decarbonize while keeping energy affordable and reliable. So today we're going to talk about what actually takes to move from polarization to progress and whether bridge building in this moment can work when the stakes are so high. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me, Carolyn. So
You're
happy.
welcome. A lot happening in this world right now, and especially for energy. And I think it has there's such a parallel on so many levels, and that's why I wanted to kind of knit that together on some level. But before we get into the meat of it all, I wanted to just touch on you and how you began, right? You started in Michigan and you moved to Denver to focus on corporate social responsibility, right? And the environment. So how did you get involved in the energy sector? And has it changed your understanding of environmental work?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So I've always been passionate about the environment. I had a great middle school teacher growing up. Her name's Pauline Roberts. I credit her for a lot. And we won third place in Siemens We Can Change the World Challenge for implementing a trash-free Friday.
Nice.
Yes, yes, it was super fun. And it taught me a lot about the environment. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that the energy sector sits in the middle of so many issues that I care about. So, community resilience, economic opportunity, public health, climate, all of it's
Yes.
connected to energy. And I've definitely changed my perspective a lot since entering this industry. You know, I think that working in this sector has made environmental work less of a set of ideals and more of an on the ground, real world. It's turned into a real world trade-off conversation. So right now, I'm particularly interested in reliability, affordability, and decarbonization, and about how all three of those need to move forward together in order for us to achieve deep emissions reductions. So it's not just about setting ambitious climate targets, it's about the infrastructure, the policy, the implementation at scale to really get us there. And ultimately, it's reinforced the idea for me that environmental work is most effective when it's grounded in people's everyday lives. You know, how they heat their homes, power their businesses, you know, stay safe during extreme weather, things like that. And ultimately, I love working in this industry. There's a lot of problems, and as a problem solver, I'm happy to be a part of it.
Okay, well, we need you more than ever. That is for sure. I too was not, I got involved a couple of decades ago, right? But when I first entered it, you know, you just turn the lights on and off, right? You pay your bill and that's that. But it's so much more complex than that. And there's so many more variables of just our communities and how energy affects it. And that's never been more prevalent as right now in our energy transition, right? And here we are trying to decarbonize, and we're also looking at a big affordability issues. We're doing that with electrification, with our aging grid, and all of that is creating a big perfect storm here. And so we need everyone. Like energy has not shifted this intensely in, I don't even 30 years. So here we are. And I wanted to just touch on your CEO, right? By the way, she has her own podcast, right? What's the name of her podcast?
Her
Energy Things.
podcast, Energy Things, yes.
Okay, so shout out to Energy Things. And Tisha, she wrote a book also called The Myth and the Moment, right? Which challenges these strong ideologies, right, around the energy transition. So what is the myth that she's calling out there, and what is the moment?
Absolutely. So the myth is that the energy transition is going to be easy and it's going to be quick. You know, we can just
Right.
stop oil and gas overnight and transition to a low
Yeah.
carbon economy tomorrow.
Do people still believe that? That's what I want to know.
You know, and that's what brings us to the moment. And the moment is realizing that that's not possible. It's going to be harder than we previously expected. And we encourage energy companies across the value chain to seize this opportunity in the moment as it comes to fruition, as it already has, and say, you know, while the transition is going to be hard and it's going to be tough, energy companies have the right expertise, infrastructure, capital to lead the transition towards a decarbonized economy. So that could mean, you know, innovative demonstrations through carbon capture and storage, geothermal. These companies can throw their weight behind them and they can make these innovative demonstrations, and they might work, they might not, but at least we're trying, right? Oil and gas needs to understand that this should not be a business as usual case. With the current federal administration, the moment is here, and it's time to take the high road and look past previous conflicts with environmental organizations or other groups and sit down to make incremental progress together. So the moment is really about moving forward together and realizing that deep decarbonization needs to happen. It's just, how do we get there?
Yeah.
And I think we've seen the moment, you know, across the United States as affordability becomes a huge topic for different policymakers and candidates. You know, we've seen it with New Jersey's gubernatorial race this past year. Governor Mikey Sherrill ran on an affordability agenda. We're seeing it in Connecticut's upcoming gubernatorial race, where the incumbent governor is taking a more centrist energy strategy that relies on, you know, ambitious climate goals, but also looking at the role of natural gas and you know, the role that plays in affordability. And we're seeing it across the country. So the moment is here. And what it boils down to is that having these conversations with disparate groups together to create these great ideas together that's what's going to bring us across the finish line, is really realizing that the myth is it's not real, and that we have a problem on our hands that we need to solve together.
Okay, I am all for that. Okay, I am all for that. And I think you're right. This moment is squeezing us to break out of our comfort zones, right? Because, like I said in my intro, I literally, for it was almost 12 years, right? Worked as a bridge between the utility and the environmental groups, many of them, right? And every group is different and has different philosophies and different ways of being. But when it comes down to it, right, they're both sides have lawyered up, right? And they don't sit down and talk to each other because of all the reasons of the past why that is the way it goes. And now this moment is calling for us to actually step into our humanity, frankly, and sit down, right? Even our communities to come in and having a real voice in this transition. So, which brings me to this sensible, which you've named the Sensible Energy Platform, which is quite interesting concept. So I want to talk a little bit about it, right? Because you said it was designed to be so bipartisan, right? That, as you put it, both sides don't know which side wrote it. And I thought that was a great way of putting it. So let's talk a little bit. Can you walk us through what this platform is and what problems do you want it to solve or hoping for it to solve?
Yeah, so we definitely knew we achieved bipartisanship when both sides were like, did the other one write this? So at least we're doing that
I
right.
love that.
So the Sensible Energy Platform has three pillars. It's all of the above energy, all of the above emissions reductions, and knowing the cost. And it encompasses the Colorado way, which essentially is all about having pragmatic energy conversations with entities across the aisle who have different values and objectives, but can get together to solve this together, right? And the problem we're seeing right now is that energy is so politicized. Everything is.
Yeah.
And, it's part of a broader trend, across the country. And ideology is driving right now, and thoughtful policy is kind of in the back seat. What we're doing is trying to elicit thoughtful policy that caters to all stakeholders in the energy discussion and move away from these factions that we've seen develop over the past couple years. The platform is pro-environment, it's pro-business, it's pro-consumer, and it's pro-workforce. So we wrote it so that everyone could see themselves in it. And we want to bring together these organizations that, again, might disagree on a whole number of things, but they can agree that we want all of the above energy, all of the above emissions reductions. And I would love to go deeper into those pillars if you'd like.
Yeah, yeah. So there's three pillars. I want to also know why you chose those three pillars, right? Um, and how they work on the platform.
Absolutely. So the reality is that we can only go as far as technology develops, and it's not going to be linear. So we want an all of the above energy policy at the state level to leave all of the options on the table as these technologies develop. We don't want to take anything off. And it's the same with, all of the above emissions reductions. We need flexibility when it comes to emissions reduction strategies. And we'd like for policy to promote all of them because in theory, the market will do its job, right? Right now,
Let me just stop you for that alone, all the above. I mean, they're definitely the fringe sides of both sides of the energy argument might, step into that and said, no, it's got to be all renewables or all oil and gas, right? And we know those voices are out there. But all the above, I think that's a very big chunk of the middle of knowing that it's going to take everything and everyone right now where we are in the transition to be able to get to where we need to go. Right. So I think that alone is bipartisan. I think both sides could say, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, some might have some argument around how much, but I think that's a good framework to begin with, that we got to take a look at it all. So,
absolutely. And eventually there will be, a winner technology. But right now we just don't see one. So we don't want to write any options off this table. And it's a great way to get people together. I think with the emissions reductions piece, solar and wind are great. They're definitely a part of the solution, but we still need certain dispatchable energy resources. We're missing that piece for sure. And so the third pillar is knowing the cost of new legislation regulations. There's always going to be unintended consequences for any new policy, right? We want to make sure that ratepayers and consumers are okay with those consequences before we implement any new regulations. And this pillar is really just asking policymakers to do, an analysis, do due diligence prior to introducing or implementing a new piece of policy. And so we know what's coming.
Got it. Got it. So you're really seeing this as a bipartisan, both sides, all the conversation happening, right? When so often there's been a lot of, which I've named, a lot of animosity sometimes between the groups, which prevents them from actually sitting down. But it feels like this platform is a way to sit down in some ways, through technology. So even though they might disagree, what I've noticed is that often there are shared goals that everyone has, no matter what, the high level, right? Have you found that those shared goals and what are they that you've on both sides of the fence?
Absolutely. I would say that the top two are protecting the environment and protecting consumers from growing costs. It's a threat I see all the time, right? There are oil and gas companies that want nothing to do with our platform, and there are environmental organizations that want nothing to do with our platform.
Okay.
We're trying to seed this middle ground. And those that come to the table are coming to the table to make real change, right?
Okay.
I think that with the politics being so polarized, the winners and losers perspective is not where we live. The us versus them is not where we live either. We want to focus on this affordability piece and this environment piece. And, we've seen great traction, and there's a lot of support behind those two ideas from both sides.
Yeah, totally. That's where they come together. So you said a little earlier about taking the high road, right? What is the high road? What does it look like now in this moment?
Yeah. So right now, and for the next 3 years, we have a sympathetic federal administration to oil and gas, but that is not going to last forever. And the move toward decarbonization, it's a long game, regardless, what happens over the next couple years. So for oil and gas, this means that now is the time to be engaging communities and constituencies that may have not been friendly to you before, but extend an arm to them now that it seems like you're winning with the current federal administration. And start having real dialogue and building relationships, because this isn't going to last forever. It's
just like it didn't last forever, in the other administration, right? There was amazing things that happened there, right? As far as working with communities, and then it's like gone, right? So this moment is not going to last forever. Do you think the pendulum is going to come somewhere in the middle here? Hopefully.
I'd like to think so. Yes, I'd like to think so. Yeah, I'm hopeful at least.
Okay, so I interrupted you, but finish your thought. You said this moment is not going to last forever, and what? We should be what?
We should be doing some deep listening on both ends, right? Walking into a room, knowing that your mind might change about something, that, other people are at the table to work towards these shared goals of affordability and clean environment. And if not, it's okay if the objectives aren't exactly the same, as long as that main goal is at the end. So I think that's how we do it, is really sitting at the table and doing some deep, empathetic listening.
Okay. I love that. I did a whole show on empathetic listening. So I'm totally with you on that. So you're working with organizations around, some organizations on this. One in particular that we actually had on our show as well, Energy Outreach Colorado, right? And that's a great organization that's really willing to work across the divides, right? So what distinguishes organizations like that and leaders like that who can actually navigate the complexity of the moment versus those that don't or can't?
Yeah, I think so. For Energy Outreach Colorado and these other organizations, they are so focused on people and the impacts to real people.
Mm,
And it all comes back to this listening piece, right?
okay.
Walking into a room, considering other opinions, and thinking about real impacts to people on the ground. There are many groups on both sides, and if groups are committed to this incrementalism with this people-centric aspect in mind and a sense of urgency for decarbonization, that's where you hit the nail on the head is in conversations like that.
Hmm.
I think eventually leaders, such as Energy Outreach Colorado, you know, they have a seat at the table because they really are passionate and care about these unintended consequences to consumers. So I would say that's a major piece.
Okay, this is a perfect time to do a plug. So, which I know that you're involved with too. We did a show in season 2 on the 5 energy equity questions you must be asking your communities right now. And Jennifer Gremmett, who is the CEO over at Energy Outreach Colorado, said, "Hey, can we bring those questions out to the public, to our communities?" And they did, right? And they did some interviews and videos on that. And we're going to bring that out in the next. You'll see it in the next couple of shows. Some of those real live interviews of what people, frontline people, everyday people, some low income people are experiencing right now in our energy transition, so that we can hear that back to that deep listening. Um, we know that those interviews are going to have an impact, hopefully in Colorado and beyond. How would you be working with some of that material?
Absolutely. So our team is putting together what we're calling stories, and they're going to show the human impact aspect of the energy transition. We have all this data. We're geeks over here. We love data and putting together data-driven messaging documents. But what we're missing is this actual human piece. And Energy Outreach Colorado has been doing this for years. And I'm so excited about these interviews.
Mm.
We're planning to pair them with the data research that we've already
Oh, I
done.
love it.
Yeah. I think that you need data and empathy to employ both parts of your brain. And I think that often this human empathetic aspect is missing when people are making high level decisions.
Yeah.
We're looking to bring that to the front.
Okay, I love that. And sometimes it's not to exclude, I think specifically, right? It moves at a fast pace. You might have an engineer in the design stage, right? Designing a substation, super technical, right? But it's really bringing in the piece that how is that going to affect the lived experience of the people that are near it, right? Or have an interaction with it. And that it's like going the technical and the data and bringing in the real life experience of it and how those live together. That's like one of the big pieces that have to show up, I think, in the next level of our transition, which is what I believe you're speaking to. Um, you have said that energy is a justice issue, right? I'd love to know what you meant by that.
Absolutely, energy is a justice issue. We are often talking about environmental justice, which is also a serious issue. And energy justice falls under that, I think. The problem is that our low income communities suffer from what we call energy burden. And energy burden is the percentage of income that you spend on your utility bills. And rising energy costs are going to disproportionately impact our lower income communities. I think that Energy Outreach Colorado, they're doing these interviews, which is amazing. They've also collected a lot of data, and nearly 1 in 5 Colorado families spend 7% or more on their energy bills. That's why this is a justice
That's
issue.
energy burden, right? There you go.
And that's why it's a justice issue. We need to ensure that we're protecting our low-income communities from these rising costs. And I think that that's coming into a lot of conversations now across the United States. But, I want justice for these communities. We don't want to be making decisions in a vacuum that are going to end up impacting them long term.
Yeah.
And, these rising energy costs, going back to your previous question, are people going to make trade-offs between their utility bills and groceries and healthcare and medicines and these other essential goods and items that we need to survive in our society today? So that's why we're so concerned about this.
Yeah. And it's having spoke to other utility leaders that it's creeping up. It's not just low income, right? We're looking at moderate income folks that are really struggling as well. Some of the studies that I've read, I know Accenture, the company, nearly, and eSource as well, nearly 1 in 3 people in the United States have struggled to pay their energy bill last year.
Yeah.
Hello, that's a justice issue, right? So, okay. So recently, here in Colorado, right, we had a big windstorm, if you will, right? And 55,000 homes lost their power. This is another reality that we're dealing with, right? Affordability, but also climate change or wildfires or just shifts on that. So these high winds happened, right? And there were traffic accidents. There were generators that went down in hospital. As a matter of fact, that very day, I had an appointment at our local hospital for like a checkup, and the power went off. I couldn't have it. People were in the hospital and the power went off. It's like, okay, this is the reality of the moment. Like that's like someone's on a machine, the power, and they were having someone told me they were having a problem with one of their generators. I don't know if that was true, but that's what I heard out of the hospital. So it drove home how critical reliability is in this right now, right? And how should we be thinking differently about keeping the lights on in this climate changed world we live in?
I think that we, as a country, are going to be experiencing more reliability issues going forward. I do take it for granted sometimes just turning my light switch on and having the lights turn on.
Yes.
But this requires some careful planning. We are taking steps, as a country, as a state, to reduce climate-related risks for reliability. But the reality is that reliability challenges are growing. And the biggest issue stems from infrastructure constraints and the system simply being stretched too thin. So I believe it was the Colorado Electric Transmission Authority did an analysis, and they think it's going to take about $8.7 billion in infrastructure to meet the rising demand over the next 20 years. And, one of the things that we can control is the dispatchable energy, right? We need dispatchable energy to be called on when we are suffering from energy unreliability, right? When the power goes out at our hospitals and in our homes. Electricity demand is rising faster now because of, data centers and electrification and, whatever other large loads are in our future, right? So it creates stress on the grid and makes it harder to keep up for these technologies that are not dispatchable. So that is a key component we are looking at is, what kind of clean dispatchable technologies can we look into to address this reliability issue? All these challenges aren't independent from one another. They're, all together. Reliability challenges can stem from wildfire risks, an aging grid, and not having the power at the right time. So that's definitely something we're plugged into and worried about.
Yeah. On our last show, we had Microsoft on, right? And they talked, Hannah Green, right, talked about the digitalized grid that is on its way, right, in the cloud, our grid, which to me has some security issues, right? But she spoke to that, and also how it's all going to change on a lot of different levels, right? What you're talking about. And so that we're in this shift, a huge shift. And you're such a young person. So I want to ask you, what gives you hope in this moment?
It's a great question. And there are a lot of things that give me hope. But regarding specifically energy, um, through the Sensible Energy platform, we've seen our messaging be picked up by policymakers. The 2025 Clean Energy Planning Bill that the Colorado Energy Office was going to introduce last year had a hard goal of 100% reduction by 2040. Now the drafts that are being circulated are proposing 98%-ish by 2050, leaving room for this flexibility and these technologies to catch up. So policymakers are considering these issues. They're worried about affordability. That gives me hope. And as well as, most people being on board with decarbonization needs to happen sooner rather than later, because those are the
Yeah.
two things that I'm really passionate about. And, I'm confident that we can achieve deep decarbonization. And I think we can do it, without having these severe impacts to our consumers. And the way to do that is to get people together, and I guess I'll leave you with this. We have seen innovative demonstrations across the country, whether it's hydrogen, geothermal, modular nuclear, carbon capture and storage. We're seeing all of these companies invest in these types of technologies to test them out. And they're receiving, I'd say most of them are receiving bipartisan support. So that has also given me a lot of hope, is that, through all of this mess, there's bipartisan support for these different technologies that may or may not be the silver bullet. Time will tell. But yeah, we just don't know what's going to happen. I'm confident that, as a society, as a nation, we can get there. We have successfully tackled a lot of challenges like this in the past. And I think that we'll continue to tackle challenges like this together as a country and as the world. Decarbonization is a huge topic right now, and that gives me hope. We can do this, and we can use all of our brain power from across the aisle to get there.
All right. I love it when I hear that from our youth, from the people that are the young people that are really going to make it happen, that you are our future. So that brings me great joy. And as we wrap up, I just want to say that the bridge building work that Julia and I talked about today reminds us that progress isn't about winning arguments or waiting for some silver bullet. It's about getting people in the same room. It's about asking those hard questions. It's about empathy. We talked about that, and designing solutions that we can do together to keep the lights on and keep the bill affordable as we move towards a cleaner energy future. And that's how we go from polarization to progress. So if this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe to Just Power and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. It might be a utility executive, it might be a policy advocate, a community leader, right? Or forward it to someone on the other side of the equation. That might even be more interesting, right? Because the future is where we're building, requires all of us at the table. So in closing, Julia, how do people get in touch with you? If they want to learn more about your work, right? How does that happen?
Absolutely. I would encourage those people to shoot me an email at julia@energythinks.com. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. Just look up Julia DeTar. Happy to connect, happy to continue this conversation. And I'm looking forward to it as well.
Awesome. I'll have all of that in the show notes. And as I always say, remember, we are all in this together. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to Just Power wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really loved it, leave us a review and tell everyone you know about our podcast. It's going to take all of us to create a clean energy future that leaves no one behind.